right, so you're on your way to dinner.
So I'm
with
on
Halle
my way.
Berry.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on my way to dinner with Halle Berry, and Ephraim calls me up, and he's like, David, you got to get to the office right now. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, I just saw this solicitation. It's huge. It's huge. We got to work on this. We got to get to the office right now. There's an emergency. It's an emergency. We got to. And I'm like, dude, I'm like about to have like dinner with my girl. He's like, fuck that. Cancel dinner. Get to the office right now. You want to make some fucking money? And I'm like, when's the solicitation deadline? He's like, in like a month and a half. And I'm like, so we can work on this tomorrow.
Oh my
and
God.
he's like,
he didn't like that.
Yeah, he's like, listen. Your girlfriend is gonna be sucking your dick when you're making millions of dollars. You know, you gotta teach her what's important in life. You know, you want to eat dinner, you want to make millions. You know, and so I mean that's just kind of how he talked and like his general. I mean, so he was a very stressful person to work with because he's constantly yelling. Like he'd call me at 3 a.m, you know, and start yelling about how it was some emergency. You know, everything was an emergency with him. Like he was never like nothing
One of
was
those.
ever exactly.
Yeah.
Like he was just like he's railing coke all day. You know,
Yeah.
it's like just like that. Yeah.
Gaming!
Pretty much. Yeah, that's it. You're not very far off, actually.
The worst part is, though, I know he changed it, but I keep picturing Jonah Hill, like fat little guy running around and screaming, doing this, and I know that's not quite what it was.
Yeah.
Which kind of ruins it. But
Ephraim was actually skinny at this time.
I heard.
Because he was doing so much coke, probably. But he did get much fatter later. But after the movie, during the time the movie portrays him, he was actually skinny. But when he was awaiting sentencing, he got really fat.
Got it.
Yeah, because he like
nothing else to do.
Yeah, exactly. He was just spending a lot of money on food and drugs and prostitutes and all that because he was just living it up. Because
the normal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he had millions of dollars and he knew he was going to go to prison, so he was living it up. But yeah, that's when he really gained a lot of weight.
Yeah, so but just to step back off this phone call for a second, we'll come back to that. But at this point, if it's been like 9 months working with him, something like that, you had reconnected with him at the beginning of this. You immediately go working with him. Yeah. 2 questions. Number 1, did you leave behind like the other businesses for the time being?
No, I was still doing it. I was still I was doing so the SD card business eventually failed because the suppliers in China started making like counterfeit stuff. And like so that they so like it would say like 4 gigabytes, but it was really 1. So like and I started getting really bad ratings on eBay because customers were really pissed, and so eventually I got screwed over by one of the suppliers. They sent me a whole bunch of bad cards, and so I stopped doing the SD card business. I was still doing the bed sheet business, but it was kind of like a bit on the decline. It was kind of like going down. So I wasn't making as much money as I was before.
And you're not focusing on it as much.
And I wasn't, exactly. I wasn't focusing on it. I was mainly living off my savings at the time. So that, that 100K was dwindling.
But you're working hard at
but I was, I was working on, making, money in the government contracting business. And unfortunately for me, Ephraim never really paid me for the contracts because the way he put it was he would like after we won the first contract, he's like, I was already working on the other ones, and he says to me, he's like, well, I'm financing these contracts with my money, so it's only fair that you finance it with whatever money you have too. Mm-hmm. So instead of paying you on that contract, why don't we just roll it into the next contract, and so you could finance that, and it kept on rolling, and eventually he decided not to pay me at all. So I ended up making nothing from the whole thing. From the whole thing. Yeah.
So anyway, back to this phone call that we started this tangent on. So 9 months in, you get a phone call. You're taking Halle Berry out to dinner.
Yeah, that's right.
And then he's like, you got to get in the office right now, but it's not due for a month and a half. And it's some big contract that had to do with the fact that the Russians couldn't fulfill it.
Right.
So what happens next?
So the next day we we met up, and he tells me, he's like, look, this contract is massive. It's like 20, 30 times bigger than anything I've ever won. So I'm going to need your help for this. I already have 5 solid suppliers in the arms business, and I'll get quotes from them. And he gave me the list of who he was getting quotes from. He's like, I want you to go on the internet and get quotes from everybody else, right? Just find every supplier that's out there, because the only way we're going to win this thing is if we're the most competitive, and we're only going to be the most competitive if we literally find every supplier on the planet who has access to the stuff that they want to buy, these munitions. And he tells me, I know that we've been working on a 50-50 deal here, but this is my bread and butter. This is something that I already, I'm bringing these 5 suppliers to the table. So why don't we do 75-25 for this one? And I said, this thing's going to be millions of dollars. I'm not greedy, I'm fine with it. I'm okay with 75-25. And he's like, great. And so I start working at it. And it took me like a few months to really get prices on everything. Because it was a real pain in the butt, because a lot of the suppliers are Eastern European countries. And they still have kind of like a cultural holdover from the Soviet era, where someone doing their job they're just trying to do the minimum. And like, if you call them up, you're bothering them. It's not like they're excited to talk to you.
Call it 5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I'd have to like get them on the phone, and then get someone who speaks a little bit of English. And of course they don't use email, so you had to fax them the paperwork, and half the time the fax would not go through.
They had that.
Yeah, right. So the fax would fail half the time because they had bad phone connections, and then I'd have to confirm they got the fax, and then they would ignore me for a week or two, and and have to constantly bother them. It was a big hassle, but yeah, it's okay.
Bad example.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's your podcast.
Yeah, fuck, man.
Yeah. So eventually I got really solid prices on pretty much everything. And
how long did that take?
It took about a month and a half to 2 months.
Okay. Yeah. So do you remember exactly how big the contract was again? What you had to supply?
Oh, you mean the actual items?
Yeah.
So there were about 30 different items, and it was everything from small arms, stuff for bullets for ammunition for small handguns, all the way up to tank rounds and anti-aircraft rockets.
Good stuff.
And so it was just munitions. It wasn't weapons. It was just the stuff that goes in the weapons. And and it was just the entire gamut. It was the entire range of munitions that the entire army and police force would need for the next 30 years. So the numbers were enormous. I think they wanted something like 150 million rounds of AK-47 ammo, the 7.62x39. They wanted 1.1 million grenades. How
many people live in Afghanistan? Can we Google that? What the population of Afghanistan is?
Yeah.
Let's check that, because it was smaller back then, I'm sure. So let's check it now.
Yeah.
Real quick and see what that. What was that? 1.1 million grenades.
Yeah, that's what they wanted. Yeah.
All right, so 3 for every person.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well,
oh no, my math's
it's
off.
one for every 40 people.
Yeah, one for every. Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah.
And then what was the bullets?
That was 150 million rounds.
All right, that's the one where it's 4 for every person.
Yeah, exactly.
God damn.
Yeah, it was enormous. We'd never even seen anything like this before, and so we didn't actually think we were going to win. We thought that, definitely they're going to give this to General Dynamics or ATK Systems, because they're multi-billion-dollar corporations with decades and decades of history. Sure. So they're not going to give this massive contract to a couple of schmucks in their living room, And so we realized that we technically qualified to bid on it, because the way the government works is, if a contract these days, if a contract is above $250,000, back then it was $100,000, but nowadays if it's above $250,000, they require past performance, which means that you need to prove that you've done this kind of business before, right? You have delivered these kind of items. And
would his previous work, Ephraim's work on government contracts, because he did do some munition stuff, eventually qualify, or
exactly.
It wasn't big enough?
No, they did. They did. Yeah, it wasn't about the size. It was about the size. If bigger contracts would help, but the fact that he had delivered actually the same type of ammunition, not all of it, but a lot of it, to because there are 30 different items. So he had delivered several of the items to the Iraqi National Army in the past. So we technically had the the past performance to bid on this contract. So we qualified. And we figured if we qualify, we might as well submit a bid because who knows, right? We didn't actually really think we were going to win, but we felt we had to go for it. Right. And so we submitted the bid. It was, I remember Ephraim does everything at the last second. So it was the day of the deadline to submit the bid. And this particular bid, they wanted us to submit it all in like printout paperwork. Usually it's just online. You just submit it. Maybe because it was so big, I don't know. But they required us to like print out all the paperwork and mail it to them.
What do you meant? Like the Pentagon?
Yeah, to Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, that's where they do a lot of the logistics out of. So it was like, I think it was like 4 p.m. and like the post office was going to close at 5, and Ephraim still hadn't decided what profit margin to put on the contract. He was like, everyone's probably bidding 10% on this, so maybe we should bid 9, But like, what if someone else is thinking that, maybe we should bid 8 just in case someone else is bidding 9. He's like, but nobody's going to think that, right? So if we even 1% it's like a $3 million difference. So every percentage is an enormous difference. And eventually I told him, listen, Ephraim, if you don't make a decision soon, we're going to get 0 because the post office is going to close and we need to submit this in paper. And today's the deadline. Finally, he decides on 9% profit margin that we put on top of it. We print out all the paperwork. We get in his car. It's only like 10 minutes before the post office closed. He's like driving like 70 miles an hour down like residential roads like a maniac. And we're running up to the post office. The post office guy was about to lock the door, and he like pushes him, like just barrels right by him. He's like, I'm sorry, this is very important U.S. government business. And the guy's like, what the fuck? And he's like, you have to mail this. This is an issue of national security. and
you're like, I don't even know him. I met him 5 minutes ago.
For real. And they're like, fine here. And they took it. It just like barely took it. And they mailed it in, and then we didn't like hear anything from them for like 3 months, and we're like, okay, we definitely lost. And then they come back to us, and they're like, you guys, we've been looking at your bid, and are you sure about this price? Because it was a 2-year contract, right? And they're like, are you sure about this price for the 82 millimeter mortar shells for the second year? Because it was a very large amount. And the truth is that Ephraim had knowingly kept the price the same, even though he did not have enough supply to fulfill that. Because
wait, what do you mean?
So the way it works here, I'll tell you how it works. So the way these enormous contracts work is that they don't give you like like an order for $300 million, even if you win the contract, right? They give it to you in pieces, right? They call them task orders, right? So they'll give you maybe like $1 million here, $10 million there, $50 million. They give it in pieces, right? And when you deliver, you get paid 30 days later, right? Now they split. When they asked us to submit the bid, they split the prices into year 1 and year 2, and you had the option to give different prices for year 1 and year 2. Year 2 was actually a much larger quantity than year 1. Okay, and Ephraim knew that he only had enough mortar shells to supply year 1 at the price that he was quoting the government, but he said that he was going to be able to supply year 2 as well, knowing that was not true because he would, in reality, he would have to find the only shells available were at much higher prices. So he knew all his competitors were bidding at higher prices. So he falsely put in this lower price for the year 2 to keep the overall price of the contract down, so he has a better chance of winning the contract.
But then if you win the contract, I'm just playing a hypothetical here. If you get it, you get 1 year in, and then you can't do it, right? You go to them and say, "Fuck, I got to raise the price." So
then he will. That's true, and then they would usually say no, and then he may default on the contract. But at that point,
he already made a lot.
He's already delivered like $150 million worth of stuff. So,
does that fuck you in the future?
Absolutely. Yeah. But he only did things for the short term.
Right.
That's how he worked.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about him more.
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. So, but the government. They were getting all these bids, and they realized there's something fishy here.
And what are these two kids in Miami doing? Yeah.
But they, to their credit or not to their credit, depending on how you look at it, they thought that we just made a mistake. And so they came back to us and they're like, do you want the chance to modify your bid? Because are you sure about that price that you gave us for year 2 on these 82 millimeter mortar shells? And Ephraim was like, oh shit, they know.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.